By the time I realized the man I loved was destroying me, I had already defended him to my family, lost my best friend, emptied my savings account, and almost ruined my own life. And the craziest part, I still wanted him to text me back. My name is Amara Johnson, and the first time I met Damian Cole, he looked like trouble wrapped in expensive perfume. It was raining outside Club Monarch in Atlanta, and I was standing under the leaking awning in heels that felt like punishment. My best friend Tasha kept yelling over the music that we should leave because the DJ sounded like he was fighting for his life. I laughed so hard I snorted my drink through my nose. And that was exactly when Damian walked over with a white napkin and a grin that could make common sense disappear. He said, "I've seen people fall in love at first sight, but I've never seen someone almost drown in a margarita. I should have rolled my eyes. Instead, I laughed hard." He was charming in that dangerous way movies warn women about but still somehow make attractive. He talked like he understood pain, like he had survived things, like he could see directly through my fake confidence. Within 20 minutes he knew my favorite music, my dream job, and the fact that my father had abandoned us when I was 11. I remember thinking, this man listens. That was my first mistake. Broken people often mistake attention for safety. When Damian drove me home that night, he didn't try to kiss me. He just looked at me and said softly, "You deserve better than what people have given you." Nobody had ever said that to me before. I sat in my apartment afterward staring at the ceiling like a teenager in a romance movie. Tasha texted me immediately. "Girl, that man fine but his eyes scream probation officer." I laughed for 10 straight minutes. I wish I had listened to her. Damian came into my life like a hurricane carrying flowers. Every morning started with long paragraphs about how beautiful I was. Every evening ended with FaceTime calls that lasted until sunrise. He sent food to my office without warning. One day my co-workers screamed because a violinist walked into the lobby playing "Can't Help Falling in Love." I wanted to die from embarrassment, but secretly I loved every second. My boss Denise looked at me and whispered, "That kind of intensity usually comes with a documentary later." I laughed because I thought she was jealous. Damian made me feel chosen, special. He told me no one had ever understood him the way I did. He called me his peace, his home, his future wife. Looking back now, it happened too fast. But when you've spent years feeling invisible, attention feels like oxygen. He knew exactly when to cry in front of me, exactly when to tell me stories about his childhood trauma, his mother's addiction, his father's violence, the nights he slept in cars. I wanted to save him. That was the hook. Trauma bonding never begins with pain. It begins with purpose. You start believing your love can heal someone who refuses to heal themselves. One night, while we ate tacos in his apartment, Damian stared at me and said, "Promise you'll never leave me like everyone else." I held his hand and promised. I didn't know that promise would cost me almost everything. The first fight started over pancakes. That sounds ridiculous now, but trauma never enters dramatically at first. It slips in wearing slippers. Damian wanted blueberry pancakes. I ordered chocolate chip by accident. When the waitress walked away, his entire mood changed. He went silent, cold, sharp. I thought maybe he was stressed, so I joked, "Relax, Gordon Ramsay. It's breakfast." He stared at me with this expression that made my stomach tighten. Then he muttered, "You never listen." I laughed nervously because surely this grown man wasn't angry over pancakes. Wrong. He spent the entire drive home criticizing me. The way I interrupted him, the way I dressed, the fact that I talked too loudly. Suddenly the same things he once adored became flaws. I remember sitting in my car afterward trying not to cry because it felt stupid to cry over breakfast food. 10 minutes later he called sobbing. Actually sobbing. He said he hated himself. Said he pushed people away because he was damaged. Then he whispered, "Please don't leave me." And just like that, my anger disappeared. That's how the cycle works. Hurt, apology, intimacy. Repeat. You become addicted to the reconciliation because it feels more passionate every time. By month 4, I was apologizing for things I didn't even understand. Once Damian ignored me for 2 days because I posted a selfie he thought was too friendly, Another time he accused me of disrespect because I laughed too hard at a waiter's joke. Yet somehow, every argument ended with me comforting him, me reassuring him, me proving my loyalty. I started shrinking to keep the peace. And the scariest part, I thought that was love. Tasha hated Damian almost immediately. Not in the dramatic reality TV way. Quietly, carefully, she noticed things I ignored. The way he squeezed my arm too hard when I interrupted him. The way he corrected my stories in public. The way he stared at my phone screen whenever it lit up. One afternoon she came over with wine and said, "Amara, this man is emotionally kidnapping you." I nearly choked laughing. "Emotionally kidnapping?" I asked. "Girl, you sound like a therapist from TikTok." But Tasha wasn't laughing. She looked genuinely scared. She reminded me that I used to paint every weekend. I used to go dancing. I used to answer my phone without asking permission first. I got defensive immediately because trauma bonds thrive on defensiveness. I told her she didn't understand him. I told her he had trauma. I told her love required patience. She stared at me for a long moment and finally said, "Love shouldn't feel like you're constantly auditioning." I should have listened. Instead, I stopped talking to her as much because Damian said she was negative energy. Isn't it funny how controlling people always isolate you slowly? They never say, "Stop seeing your friends." They just make every interaction exhausting until you give up yourself. The last time Tasha came to my apartment before everything exploded, Damian smiled in her face while secretly unplugging her phone charger every time she left the room. Petty, childish. Honestly, I almost laughed. But later that night he said, "Your friend disrespects our relationship," and somehow, I ended up apologizing to him again. Damian had a talent for humiliation disguised as humor. At first it seemed harmless. During dinner with my coworkers he joked that I burn water when cooking. Everyone laughed, including me. Then it became comments about my weight, my voice, my intelligence. Once at a party he said, "Amara is so emotional she'd cry during a toothpaste commercial." The room exploded with laughter while I forced a smile so hard my cheeks hurt. On the drive home I finally said his jokes embarrassed me. He rolled his eyes and called me sensitive. Then he added, "See? This is why your ex cheated on you. You overreact to everything." That sentence hit me like a slap. He knew how badly my last relationship damaged me. He knew exactly where my insecurities lived. But instead of comforting them, he weaponized them. I cried quietly facing the car window while he drove in silence. 5 minutes later he reached over, wiped my tears, and whispered, "Baby, I'm just trying to make you stronger." Stronger. That word trapped me for months. Because every painful thing suddenly became growth. Every insult became honesty. Every cruel moment became tough love. Meanwhile, I was losing pieces of myself daily. The funny thing is, people on the outside still envied our relationship. Social media saw flowers, vacations, matching outfits, and romantic captions. They didn't see me crying in bathrooms or rehearsing conversations in my head so I wouldn't accidentally upset him. Trauma bonding is terrifying because sometimes the prison looks beautiful from the outside. The cheating rumors started online. Some anonymous account commented under my picture, "Ask your man about Sierra." At first I laughed because internet trolls are unemployed philosophers with Wi-Fi. But something about the comment stayed in my mind. When I confronted Damian, he exploded instantly. Not nervous, not confused, furious. He accused me of disrespecting him. Accused me of paranoia. Then he stormed out of my apartment. I spent the night panicking, convinced I had ruined everything. The next morning he returned with flowers and tears, saying his ex had been harassing him. I believed him because by then my reality depended on his approval. A week later I found Sierra's earrings under his bed. Tiny gold hoops. Definitely not mine. My stomach dropped so hard I thought I'd faint. When I confronted him again, he didn't deny it immediately. Instead, he stared at me coldly and said, "If you hadn't pushed me away emotionally, none of this would have happened." I actually apologized. Let that sink in. I apologized after catching him cheating. Trauma bonds twist logic until survival feels like love. Later that night, he cried in my lap, talking about how broken he was. Meanwhile, I sat there comforting the man who betrayed me. It sounds insane now, but when someone trains you to fear losing them, your brain stops protecting you. That night I looked in the mirror and barely recognized myself. Mascara everywhere, eyes swollen, spirit exhausted. Yet somehow I still wanted him to choose me. 3 months later, my mother died unexpectedly from a stroke. Everything after that became blurry. Hospital lights, relatives whispering, funeral flowers that smelled like endings. I was shattered. Damian showed up looking supportive, holding my hand, introducing himself as my future husband. Everyone praised him for being such a strong man. They had no idea that 2 hours before the funeral he screamed at me because I forgot to answer his text while choosing my mother's casket. During the reception, he disappeared for nearly an hour. I later discovered he was outside arguing with another woman on the phone. But grief makes people tolerate things they normally wouldn't. I clung to him because losing my mother reopened every abandonment wound I had. That's when the bond became almost impossible to escape. He became my comfort and my pain at the same time. Some nights he held me while I cried about my mother. Other nights he used my grief against me during arguments, calling me unstable and dramatic. Once he actually said, "Your mom babied you too much." I threw a glass across the room. He looked shocked, then strangely satisfied. That's another secret nobody talks about. Toxic people sometimes push you until you react, then use your reaction to prove you're the problem. Afterward, he hugged me while I sobbed, whispering, "See, we're both damaged." I started believing chaos meant connection. By year 2, my world had become painfully small. I barely saw friends anymore. My family stopped inviting me to gatherings because Damian always created drama. He once accused my cousin Marcus of flirting with me because Marcus hugged me too long at Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving? Sir, that man shares DNA with me. Yet somehow the entire night became about Damian's insecurity. I spent hours comforting him in the car while everyone inside ate pie and laughed. Isolation didn't happen overnight. It happened one cancelled plan at a time, one argument at a time, one emotional guilt trip at a time. Eventually, it became easier to stay home than deal with his reactions. I remember one Friday night sitting on the floor eating cold fries while Damian played video games, ignoring me completely. I looked around the apartment and realized I felt lonely beside someone I loved. That realization terrified me more than screaming ever could. A few minutes later, he suddenly became affectionate again, pulling me into his lap and joking about how terrible I looked in my oversized pajamas. "You look like a depressed Teletubby," he laughed. I laughed too hard because honestly it was funny. That's what made everything confusing. Trauma bonds aren't miserable every second. Sometimes they're hilarious, tender, addictive. The good moments become emotional lottery tickets. You keep enduring pain hoping another good moment arrives. The night everything finally shattered started with karaoke and ended with blood. Tasha convinced me to attend her birthday party after months of barely speaking. Damian acted supportive at first, too supportive. That should have scared me. At the party, I laughed for the first time in months. Real laughter, the kind that makes your stomach hurt. I sang horribly, danced badly, and forgot to check my phone. When I finally looked down, I had 32 missed calls from Damian. 32. My stomach sank immediately. I rushed outside and called him back. He answered screaming so loudly I had to hold the phone away from my ear. He accused me of cheating, said I embarrassed him, said I was acting single. Tasha grabbed the phone and told him to calm down. He called her a disgusting name I still hate repeating. Something inside me cracked. For the first time, anger outweighed fear. I stayed at Tasha's apartment that night. Around 2 a.m., Damian showed up banging on the door like a man in a horror movie. Neighbors came outside. Someone threatened to call police. Then Damian punched a hallway mirror, splitting his hand open. Blood everywhere. And there I was, comforting him again. Sitting in an emergency room holding tissues against a hand that terrified me. I remember staring at the blood thinking, how did my life become this? A week later I discovered Damian had been seeing Sierra the entire relationship. Not occasionally, continuously. She sent screenshots, pictures, hotel receipts. Even worse, She had no idea I existed at first. We were both victims in different ways. I met Sierra at a coffee shop expecting hatred, but instead we just looked tired, exhausted, embarrassed. She told me Damian used the same lines on her, same promises, same trauma stories. At one point we actually started laughing because the man recycled emotional speeches like a motivational speaker with memory loss. That laughter healed something inside me. For the first time I realized the issue was not my worth. Damian created emotional dependency everywhere he went. Sierra looked at me seriously and said, "He needs women to feel responsible for saving him." That sentence changed my life. I drove home crying harder than I had in months because the fantasy finally died. Not the relationship. The fantasy. The idea that if I loved him perfectly, he would stop hurting me. Trauma bonds survive on hope. Once hope dies, clarity enters. That night Damian showed up at my apartment begging, crying, threatening self-harm, promising therapy, promising change, promising marriage. Old me would have folded instantly. But something had shifted. I looked at him and suddenly saw a drowning man trying to pull everyone underwater with him. Nobody warns you that leaving a toxic relationship can feel like withdrawal from a drug. The first week without Damian felt unbearable. I kept checking my phone every 5 minutes. Every song reminded me of him. Every street corner carried memories. My body literally craved the chaos. I almost texted him dozens of times. One night I sat on my kitchen floor holding my phone while ugly crying into leftover noodles. Tasha walked in, took the phone from my hand, and said, "Baby, you are not about to resurrect your own villain." I laughed so hard noodles flew out of my mouth. That woman saved my life with comedy. But healing wasn't linear. Some days I hated him. Other days I missed him desperately. Trauma bonds confuse pain with connection, so peace initially feels empty. Quiet felt unnatural. I started therapy reluctantly because honestly I thought therapy was just expensive crying. Turns out it was expensive healing. My therapist explained intermittent reinforcement to me, how unpredictable affection creates addiction. Suddenly everything made sense. The highs felt intense because the lows were devastating. My nervous system had mistaken survival for passion. For months I grieved not only Damian but the version of myself who tolerated so little. 3 months after the breakup, Karma arrived wearing designer sunglasses. Damian got exposed online by multiple women simultaneously. Apparently he had been juggling relationships like a motivational clown. Screenshots flooded social media. Lies, manipulation, borrowed money never returned. One woman even posted a video of him pretending to meditate while secretly texting 3 girlfriends. I laughed until I wheezed. The comments were brutal. "Sir needs a group subscription plan." "Emotional support scammer." "Community boyfriend." Even my grandmother called me asking, "Wasn't that the skinny liar you dated?" I nearly drove off the road laughing. But the real revenge wasn't public humiliation. The real revenge was my recovery. Around that same time, I got promoted at work. I started painting again, started sleeping peacefully, started remembering who I was before survival became my personality. One afternoon Damian texted, "I miss you." Just that. 2 years of emotional warfare reduced to 4 words. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I blocked him. No dramatic speech. No revenge paragraph. Silence. Because healing teaches you something powerful. Closure is not always a conversation. Sometimes closure is refusing to reopen the door. The hardest part of healing was rebuilding my identity. Trauma bonding slowly erases people until they forget their own voice. I had to relearn simple things. What music I actually liked. What food I enjoyed without criticism. How to spend a Saturday without anxiety. Tasha practically forced me back into living. She dragged me to painting classes, comedy shows, and one disastrous yoga session where I farted during downward dog and considered moving to another country. For the first time in years, my laughter sounded natural instead of nervous. I started meeting new people cautiously. One man named Elijah took me on a date and didn't insult me once. Honestly, I found it suspicious. I kept waiting for the emotional ambush. But healthy people don't create emotional roller coasters to feel important. That realization hit me deeply. Real love felt calmer, safer, less cinematic maybe, but far more peaceful. I no longer confused anxiety with chemistry. I no longer mistook inconsistency for passion. Healing taught me that love should not require self-abandonment. If you constantly feel exhausted proving your worth, that isn't love. That's survival wearing romance as a disguise. Sometimes people ask if I hate Damian now. Honestly, no, hatred requires emotional attachment, and I finally released that. I understand him better than I wish I did. Hurt people often hurt people because chaos feels familiar. But understanding someone's pain does not require sacrificing yourself to it. That lesson cost me years to learn. One evening nearly a year later, I saw Damian accidentally at a grocery store. He looked older, smaller somehow. He froze when he saw me. For a split second the old anxiety returned. Then something surprising happened. Nothing. My body didn't panic. My heart didn't race. I just felt free. He asked how I'd been. I smiled politely and said, "Peaceful." That word hit him harder than anger ever could. Because people who thrive on chaos cannot understand peace. As I walked away, I realized something important. Trauma bonds convince you that losing someone will destroy you. But sometimes losing them is exactly what saves your life. If you're listening to this while defending someone who constantly hurts you, listen carefully. Love should not leave you confused every day. Love should not require you to shrink, beg, panic, or disappear just to keep it alive. Real love does not punish you for having boundaries. And trauma disguised as romance will keep eating your soul until you forget your own reflection. I confused trauma bonding for love because chaos felt familiar to my wounds. But healing taught me something I'll never forget. Just because someone suffered before meeting you does not mean you must suffer to stay with them. The night I finally chose myself, I thought my world was ending. The truth, my life was finally beginning.